out, but there's not enough for everybody, but they're only really for reference, for if you need to remember something I've said and just catch sight of them. So hopefully that will be okay with you all.
And you can take a picture of them with your phone so you can have a reference.
Oh,
I was asked to borrow one and just take a picture.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's coming around. There's a sign up for this.
There's a sign up thing coming around here.
Practitioner certificate. So it's coming around.
Okay, so people who don't know me, I'm Angelina Bennett. I'm from England. I'm currently the president of the British APTi. And we have a wonderful conference every year, which you should all come to. The next one's in the beginning of March. So we're going to put more information about that later. And Susan Nash is going to help coordinate it for us. But I'm also an occupational psychologist, which means working with people at work in psychology, so using the MBTI a lot in development. But also, several years ago I did a doctorate advancing the theory, which is some of the stuff I'm going to share. I'm not going to go heavy on the research and numbers because it doesn't seem to be everybody's thing, including mine. But if anybody wants to know more about that afterwards, I'm happy to share it. So, just a quick show of hands. Who here has seen me talk about ego development before? A few of you? Okay. So the bit in the middle is sort of similar because it's going through that theory, but hopefully the bit around the edges I've tried to make a bit different. Who here is familiar with ego development theory? Yeah? Some of you do. Okay. So I'm going to start from scratch with it. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. And yeah, let's see how we go then. So the reason I got interested in the idea of development and effectiveness was I work as a qualifying trainer on the MBTI workshops in the UK. So I get to meet lots and lots of people all the time that I know the types of. So there's one there, there's one there I can see, I can't see the other one. But yeah, so I get to meet lots of people all the time, I know their types, and I noticed that there were big differences sometimes in how they would come across. So if we take an example of someone like an ESFJ, I might meet an ESFJ who's really quite motivated to help, as most of them are, motivated to be nurturing, but not intrusive, asks more questions and they do more talking, pretty much there for you, and nice supporting. Whereas I could meet another ESFJ who I experience as quite interfering, intrusive. They tell me how I feel, because it's how they feel, etc., etc. So there are variations in how these types would come across. Not just the ESFJs, all the types. So I started to think about what the differences were. And a couple of the main theories that tend to be out there are about neuroticism. A lot of this comes from the 5-factor fans. Do people know the 5-factor model? It's more of a trait thing, and they're always trying to correlate it with MBTI, even though it's completely different. But neuroticism, which is anxiety, stress response, ability to cope. So neuroticism is a big one. Does that affect how people come across? The other one is development. So how balanced are you? How self-aware are you? How aware are you of others? Yeah, what's your perspective? So I started to explore these to see what place they have in these different expressions of type, people being effective and not so effective. So as I was interested in it, and I was doing a lot of work at home, I thought, I know, I've got a good idea. I'll get a doctorate out of this while I'm going. Fool. So there's nothing like a doctorate to knock any interest out of something. So all my nice intuitive ideas and my connections, and I trust this just because it works, it all had to go back to what's been done before, base it on something, you're not allowed to have an original thought and all this. Anyway, just the word effectiveness was enough to set the tutor off. Well, what do you mean by effectiveness? And you're like, you know, effectiveness. No, had had to define it. So the first study was a vet grid study, where you interview people and you compare across people who they see as effective and not so effective. So I did the vet grid study to try and get a clear definition of what are we talking about when we talk about effectiveness. So I interviewed 7 of my favouriteest MBTI people who I know really know the MBTI well, and they work as coaches and they've met lots of people, so a lot of them were qualifying trainers that I've worked with. And I asked them to think of people who were effective and not so effective and try and pick out the differences in characteristics. And from that, I managed to put together these, this is the first handout, these descriptions here. So on the side that says elicited from rep grids, that's the column that says what the main comments were that were coming out, the ones that were always similar. And on the other side of that, you'll see bits that correlate with the research. I had to pick through Jung and Myers' research on effectiveness to say, is it the same as they're saying? And it really did seem to be similar. So that was good, because I'm dominant introverted intuition and I like things when they connect. If they connect, they're right. So the conclusion from that was perceived effectiveness, as in what somebody else sees as effective, is linked to type development, as Jung and Myers would have thought about it. So I started to move away from the word effectiveness a bit and think more about development. Okay. Just if anyone's interested, I confirmed this with a quantitative study. So I put together a questionnaire where I had items related to neuroticism, items related to ego development, and I asked people to think of someone who they thought was effective, someone who they thought was not so effective, that they knew the type of, and rate them on these items. There's lots of fancy stats on it, factor analysis, logistic regression, all this stuff to build the models. And lo and behold, the effectiveness was related more to the ego development questions than the neuroticism. But again, we're talking about what somebody else is seeing, what somebody else is perceiving in you. Okay. So, just wanted to start you off thinking about effectiveness. I was going to put you into type-alike groups, but that would be an absolute mess. So we'll stay where we are on our tables. So there might not be similarities, more differences. But what conditions help you to be at your most effective? If you turn the handout over, you'll see the definitions I came up with in the end. Have a quick look at them and have a discussion about what really brings those out in you. When are you at your best and when are you at your worst? But while you're having those discussions, I want you to think about which of these things we're talking about are in preference. Yeah, because sometimes if we're in preference, it's good. But what might be out of preference? Is there anything that really helps you be better, but it's an actually out of preference condition? And are you able to spot whether there's any sort of type development or neuroticism themes going on? Okay? So just spend 5 minutes with the people on your table, having that conversation, thinking about what makes you be the best or the not so best that you can be. Yeah. When you're at
The first thing that comes to my mind is what helps me be at my best is I've got to be physically enough sleep and rested. I look at those as sensing kinds of things. My dominant is extra. So I don't know whether that's seems to me that's an out preference or my next intuition. Sensing is pretty powerful.
And I can be very close.
Come join us.
Identify with scenarios that require all in my wheelhouse. relatively sure about what I'm talking about. So I think it also has to be an area where I'm proficient, or where I think I am.
So I have privileges for INTJ, and I would say definitely I'm more effective when I have that at times extroverted intuition. When I'm put into a situation like this where I've got to extrovert immediately, I feel less comfortable, less effective. I think one place where I can definitely say that I'm very effective, the one place is facets that I'm out of is judging proceeding. I'm pressure prompted, so I'm someone who actually doesn't plan out things in terms of papers or projects. I do like I do very well in the rush of having to get something done. So I have a preference.
My preference is for but there is a persona that I'm sure it's work. The starter and then one is which is an interesting one. I think it seems to me that I'm maybe more as opposed to
Fundamentally still feels different inside. Nobody knows better than you.
the switch that gets turned on, that's easy at work, maybe that's out of my and now I wonder if that's more
Some rookie jobs.
The response is when I have too much of that, the response is in my personal life, I run away. Right? So it's a balance. I know I can't run away at work. Normally, the personal life comes from.
It's a motivating anxiety. You're a student, and so you have to resolve this right
So that's completely in your preferences. It's really like where you can even foresee the problems. And then you actually already have a strategy.
We don't even have to talk.
Just be the same.
Let's see what sort of things we're coming out. Thank you. Cool. You knew I'd be there. Let's see what came out, a couple of highlights. I heard a lot of in-preference conversations going on. Any highlights from that? How does being in preference help you to be more effective? Yes?
It minimizes the conflict I experience. So.
Yeah. Sometimes people say it makes them feel more like in flow with their energy. Anything else? But let's move on to the not in preference. Did anyone come up with conditions where it's like, this isn't my preference, but when I'm doing it, things work out well? Yeah? So,
That's me more often than not at work.
mhm.
My preference is for ENTP. I'm pretty certain that's my preference. But at work, I most often am an ENTJ to the point where my colleagues are now starting to say, all I see is extroverted thinking, all I see is extroverted thinking, and introverted intuition. You are an ENTJ. Are you sure you're not an ENTJ? But the conditions at work are, there's a whole bunch of EINTPs and a whole bunch of projects that need to be done.
Yeah.
And I don't feel, it is to the point where I really don't feel they don't feel unnatural.
Yeah.
You know, there are parts of the project that I'm like, oh please, can I just give it to someone else? I'm done, which is my preference. But for the most part, I really function very effectively out of preference.
Do you find you have to balance it though when you're out of work and get your fix of your own preference?
Yes, when there's too much of that at work for a long period of time. The first time it happened, I didn't really know what was going on. I just realized that my personal life was a complete mess. I mean, starting from my own house, literally being a mess, but then the rest of it, and I didn't know what was going on, but now I do know. Now I actually know that when there's too much of this and and it's a constant and goes on for a while, I tend to, if there's something very big and personal left, I tend to just run away. It's like a kind of a little bit.
And has that awareness come since you learned about type?
I'm sorry?
The awareness of how to manage that, has that come from learning about type? Yeah. Okay. Eric, did you have one?
I think I said situations like this that require, for maximum experience, require extroversion.
Like this conference?
Like this. I will make an effort, I'm not very good at it, but I'll make an effort to step forward and meet the external world. And if it's in an area that I have some confidence that I have something, however small to contribute, it probably makes it easier.
Good. Okay.
I've been able to set up the situation by reflecting with my introversion and with planning. As an ISTJ, when I really feel confident in whatever I'm doing, then I can act out of preference and be in the moment, spontaneous, in front of a group, and operate like an extrovert.
So the confidence would tap into the neuroticism side. When you've got no neuroticism, when you're confident, feeling comfortable with something, that enables us sometimes to step out of preference. But I mean, are there people here that, you know, usually, I don't know, if you're a J, you might plan stuff and think it through, but if it's something you've done 100 times, you just go in and see how it goes. Yeah. So that confidence often helps us to come out of preference. Yeah. So Pam?
One thought I had is that for me to be most effective, I need to have enough sleep, enough to eat, you know, good food to eat, and some exercise. And those seem like very sensing things, extroverted sensing to me, and yet my, you know, preference is extroverted feeling is my dominant. So the sensing is like this requirement that if I don't have that, it's really a whole lot harder for me to be effective.
You might have it's a different theory, but on the Enneagram theory you have different instincts. Self-preservation is one of them. So self-pres people need to have their conditions right. They're literally their felt physical conditions.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
So
a
that could help. You might know that one. So Suzanne?
Yes, when I have to, I'm an ENFJ, and when I have to write, I need to get into the introverted world, so I'll wake up like at 4 in the morning, and I like it being dark and without the extroverted world coming at me. And so I do as much as I can between like 4 and 9 in the morning, and then the extroverted world starts in, and my energy for writing goes down.
Wow.
I just want to make a comment on the physiological statements made there, because Jung makes it clear that his theory has nothing to do with somatic things and physiology, which is kind of interesting when we amalgamate that with temperament, which actually has one of those bases. And he explains that there are actually different requirements to what there are for psychological type in that sort of respect. So you're actually looking at general body needs, which anybody, regardless of type, actually needs, rather than, and comparing it with your type is actually not relevant in that sense, if I may put it that way. In the same way that people do the same thing for different reasons. So if you actually label activity in your business, for instance, when people say you're doing introverted intuition and whatever, they actually don't know, because they have to ask you why you did it. And then they might actually have an idea as to what function that may be related to, if any, in that respect. That's just a point. Because type's not a theory of behaviour, but behaviour is a way of explaining type, then observing people and putting a label on it can actually be fraught with a few problems. That's all.
It needs to go that way around and not the behaviour to inform type. Yeah. Okay. So some of these things are in preference, most of them are in preference as I was going around listening, but every now and again there's an out of preference thing. The confidence, the absence of neuroticism can sometimes help us get out of preference as well. But also that development. So we'll go through, see where this is going. This is an amusing cartoon from my office wall. I can't remember the name of the guy who draws them. But I just like it because for me, it gives that essence of, yes, we have our niche, but also we need to break out of the box. So why do you fly outside the box? If I fly outside the box because I can. But we know the box, we're safe inside the box. That, my friend, is why I leave it. You may be safe, but I am free. Do you like it? It's good, isn't it? So, obviously, we learn about type, usually initially, to find out what conditions do we need to be at our best. Yeah? We want to get in the box, we want to find our box, we want to explore the box. But that box can become a trap. It can actually start us cutting off other things. Who knows Danielle Poirier? No, you do. Yeah. She puts it really nicely of how people start to separate their ego. So you start to say, this is me, and this is not me. This is me, this is not me. And gradually, you start to cut more and more things out of your life, and can become a caricature of yourself. So the idea of type development is, yes, know your preferences, usually try and create the conditions for your preferences, because that will help you be most effective, most happy, most content, most motivated. But you also need to be aware of those preferences so you can break out of them every now and again, because the world, certainly as an INTJ, the world does not run for INTJs. I built my little cave at home where I hide, and it's all purple and nice, and it's full of books. But it's difficult when I actually have to venture out in the world. We have to break out of the box. And it's through doing type work and getting that awareness that you can start to break out of the box. If you haven't got the awareness, you don't know what it is you're trying to get out of. So that's why I quite like that cartoon. So let's have a look at what other people are saying about type development before I look at the ego development model. So this is Jung's take on it. I think a lot of you are familiar with the terms of differentiation and individuation. We've talked, some of the presentations I've been to have talked about how type develops through the lifespan, with the dominant coming first and then the auxiliary kicking in, etc. If you actually look at Jung's differentiation theory, it's all about getting that identification of what it is you're doing, getting that self-awareness. So this comes from the step 3 manual, actually, this information. So there's 3 parts to it: mental process differentiation. And this is about the balance of perception and judgment. So if you haven't got that going on very well, if you're a J-type, you might rush into decisions without getting very good information. If you're a P-type, you might keep exploring and never rein it in. Have we all experienced that with our own types? Yeah. And even now, as probably grown up and aware people, we still fall into those traps. And then I've got a little note in here: the auxiliary is a servant or a helper. This idea, it comes from Jung's stuff, but it was packaged really nicely by a colleague of mine, Leanne Harris, at the BAPT conference. She actually works for APTi. And she was explaining that if your auxiliary function is your helper, no, let's start with servant. If your auxiliary function is your servant, it lets your dominant rule the show. So for example, as an introverted intuitive, I have an idea, and I think, ooh, I've got an idea to do something nifty, new, never been done before, original. Okay? I'm in trouble with this at the moment, so it's quite a raw nerve. And I go to my extroverted thinking to say, okay, can we make that happen? And if it's my servant, it goes, sure, we can make that happen. Yeah, you can do this, you can do that, you can do the other. There's a few other things that will ruin it for you. You know, there's a reason it's never been done before, is because it can't be done. There's a reason it's original, because it doesn't, yeah. Anyway, but it'll forget that stuff. It'll give me the logic to support it. Yeah. Whereas if it's really being my helper, it will be truly objective and say, yeah, this bit's good, but have you considered this? This is where it's going to be horribly wrong for you and cause you 2 years of pain. So that's the difference between the servant and the helper position. Yeah. So I quite like that theory. Do you like that? Does it make sense to you? And it's it just adds that extra bit of sometimes exploration with the client of how are they using those two things together. The next part is the preference pair differentiation. So this is, am I using feeling or thinking? Yeah. What am I doing at the moment? And when these are undifferentiated, they can contaminate each other. So for example, if somebody is a thinking type, but they haven't quite clarified or differentiated it from feeling, they will make an objective decision based on what it is they actually want, rather than based on the objective best outcome or result. So it's almost like that feeling gets in and says, this is what you really want to happen, so throw the logic on it that's going to make that happen. Yeah? And the final one is the internal differentiation. So within a... Oh, sorry, yes?
Could you go back and, just because it's poignant to hear you say it that way, could you illustrate the feeling function working as a helper?
Oh, as a helper, the feeling function. So extroverted feeling with what? Sensing? As the intuiting as the dominant. Okay, so if you have introverted intuition as the dominant, you think of an idea, blah, blah, blah. Again, your extroverted feeling will sort of step in as the judging function and say, how is this going to happen? How is it going to affect you? How is it going to benefit other people? You know, it will put all that in instead of saying, yeah, you want that, don't you? That's what you want. So we'll think of all the things that will make that happen. I don't know if that helps. Okay, the internal differentiation is within a preference itself. So if we take the thinking function, because it's an easy target, there are good sides of thinking, there are bad sides of thinking. So you can be a thinking type, and it's objective, it's analytical, it's clear, it's really genuinely looking for the best outcome. Or there's the nasty side of thinking, which is hypercritical, trying to put other people down, bossy, calling everyone illogical, being a bit rough, being a bit bullying. So each function has its good and its bad sides. So as you get more developed, you might catch yourself using the rough end of your function instead of the gift and quality of your function. Okay? And then we have the internal differential. Oh no, we've done that, sorry, going mad. When I looked at this, again it looks similar to the ego development theory that I'm building up to. Yeah, getting there. And the ego development theory is by Lovinger or Cook-Reuter, the reference. So it seems to fit very well with that, so when I explain it to you, it'll all come clear. But before we do that, let's just have a little bit of a look at what Myers thought. Who here is Step 3 qualified? A couple of you, I know there was a course running this week. How many here have been through the Step 3 process? Yeah, so a few of you are familiar. So Myers was always working on the idea of development. It wasn't something that came later. Right from the beginning, in her questionnaires, her early questionnaires, there were loads of extra questions trying to pull out development. Because she knew it was part of the package. She knew that type didn't exist on its own as a static thing. So again, the scales in the Step 3, just to be very broad about it, the first one is called confidence, which is all about shyness, worry, literally confidence. We need that to find. The second one is about stamina, which I see as being very akin to like resilience. How much energy do you have? How much resilience? And the third one, this is quite interesting, she calls it compensatory strain, which is a bit of a name, but it's about defensiveness, trying to defend yourself, trying to take actions, usually unconsciously, to try and protect your own ego. So resistance, defensiveness, stubbornness, cynicism. And when I had to look at it, I had to pick them all apart for the doctorate, it was a painful activity. But these two seem to really tap into the neuroticism, the confidence and stamina. This one was very much akin to the ego development. When I looked into it and looked at the scales and what they were measuring, it was very like ego development. So I think in the Step 3, she's actually getting a combination of both. But then I came across this very interesting quote. She said, "A person with low confidence, i.e. neuroticism, can be a problem to himself. Yeah, it's more of an internal thing. A person with high compensatory strain, which is the development part, is a problem to others." Yes, I found this quote after I'd done the doctorate, which is a bit of a bummer, but but I think it explains as well that the research I did was looking at this part. How do you see other people? How do you experience other people? Yeah, and definitely in that outer world, it does seem to be the development that's the issue. Okay, so let's get on with what's the ego development. Okay. So, the ego development model is a series of stages, and there's various similar things, but they all hang together. So, the one I've picked is a 7-stage model, originally by Jane Lovinger, developed by Suzanne Cook-Reuter, and it's also one of the ones that Linda Berens used. Linda actually went and did the training with Suzanne Cook-Reuter as well, so she's a fan of that one too. So I'm going to go through each stage in a bit, but first of all, just to give you the big heads up of what changes. So you go through these stages, some of them are age-related, but then they can plateau off and you have to actually make the rest of it happen. As you go through the stages, you get a broadening of your perspective. So in the early stages, when you think back to when you're a kid and stuff, the thinking's very black and white. Yeah? That there's no boundaries. You're very opinionated, you know what's right, your options are narrow. And as you develop, you get more of the shades of grey. Just a few shades of grey. Building up to the entire rainbow at the end. So, but you see what I mean? You get this more options come into it. You see different nuances, different positions. Your opinions might actually be more informed. They might change with more information. So broadening perspective. With that also comes the ability to deal with more complexity, uncertainty, difficulty, the unknown. You get increased self-awareness. So if you think about when you're young and you've never done any of this before, you just do your thing. You're on autopilot. Yeah? You're not thinking about why you're doing what you're doing or where it's coming from or what the other person's doing. You just do. Yeah? So autopilot position. But as you develop, you get more mindful about why am I doing that? What am I about? How am I feeling? What's my impact on other people? And the emotional intelligence as well. Emotional intelligence runs really nicely aside this theory. So how am I with others? How can I read other people? Understanding difference. Relationships tend to become more collaborative as well. So in the early stages, they can be more defensive, more singular, more out for yourself. Whereas as you start to develop, it's more about working with others and for others. Just less defensiveness and increased mindfulness. So, before I go through the stages, I just want to run this analogy past you to explain what the individual experiences with the ego development. Because the idea is when you're in it, when you're in a certain stage, that's all you know. Yeah, you don't know what else is out there because you haven't got there yet. But when you move, you can look back. So this nice little analogy here. If you lived in the jungle, yeah, you were born in the jungle, you lived in the jungle, you know everything about the jungle. Yeah, you know the jungle trees, the jungle animals, the jungle climate, you know where there's a jungle storm coming. You really know that, and that's all you know about the world. And you think, yeah, I know everything. I've been here for years. There's nothing I don't know about this jungle. Yeah? One day you climb a very high jungle tree, and you spot a mountain. And you're like, oh my God, what is that? Something with snow, well, you don't know about snow. Something white stuff on the top. So you come scurrying back down the tree, really worried. And then you might one day get brave enough to climb back up the tree and have another look. Yeah? So you think, okay, I'm going to walk over there. I'm going to go to that mountain and see what that's about. So are you looking for, are there any spare seats? There's one little bag on it.
Get one right over here by Robin.
So you go there, you climb the mountain, and from the top of the mountain you look back at that jungle and you can suddenly see it with clarity. I thought that was my world, I thought that was all there was to know. But now I know there's that, and there's this. And I know everything again. Yeah. You turn around on your mountain, you see a desert. Ah, what the hell is that? Same thing happens again, you freak out a bit. You decide one day to go to the desert, you stand in the desert, you can see your mountain, somehow you can see your jungle, but you get that broadening of perspective. And so it goes. You start to see bigger and bigger pictures. And then when you get to this perspective, you see that the world is a system. And it's a system existing within another system, and it's all connected to everything, and the weather systems all interact. So it's much more complex. And then you realise there's more out there, and you don't know anything. Okay? So it's that idea that when you're in it, that's all you know, and you think you know everything. So think back to when you were teenagers. Who never said to their parents, I know everything, there's nothing more for me to learn, I know more than you. Yeah? We've all been there? We have.
If we haven't
Yes,
said it, we've thought it.
Yeah.
Depends on what kind of parents you have.
So let's have a little look through the levels, and the other handout you've got sort of takes you through them in one column. We'll talk through them. Now, the reason I've egotistically put my own name up there is because the original names that Suzanne Reuter had for them sort of can sound a bit typey sometimes. So I tried to find type-neutral labels for them. So, the first level, she calls it the opportunist. Any idea what temperament that might sound like? Improviser. Right, so we didn't like that. So I changed it to power and control. And this is the level that most really little kids are at. Yeah? It's all about them. They're the only people that exist, and they're very defensive. So a nice example, if you could call it nice, was when my son was about 3, he had his little friend round, And we could hear that I've got a fish tank with 2 of the oldest fish in the universe living in it. They just will not die. But anyway, I could hear all this water splashing about. We went in, the kids are up to here, wetness, and me and the other mum were telling them off and, you know, don't play in the fish tank. And then my neighbour said to me, I thought you had 2 fish. I know. So it's like, you've got these 2 kids covered in water and you're like, where is the other fish? And they're just like, she did it, he did it, she did it. I don't care who did it, where is the other fish? She did it, he did it, she did it, he did it. We found the fish, it was in a box, it was dry. I threw it back in the water and it bloody came back to life. Really, they're so old. But that's the sort of thing. And you don't get many adults operating at this level because they don't have very good relationships. But does anyone here work with prison populations, maybe survivors of really quite bad abuse? You might catch it there, or if you work with very young kids. They sometimes have that extremely defensive way of being. But everything's black and white thinking, highly opinionated, yeah? So that's a level that doesn't function well. All the others you can do quite well at, depending on what your role is in life. So this next one, she called it the diplomat. What temperament might that sound like? Or type? NFs? NFs possibly even SJs. So I called it social identification. And this is the one that you might be like when you're a teenager or an older child, where you start to find your group and your niche. Where do I fit? Who am I like? Yeah? So you do it through your clothes, you do it through your makeup and your music that you listen to, you have in-group and out-group. Yeah? So, you know, what did you get up to when you were young? I was a goth. Can you tell? But you always have that thing about, this is my identity, this is the group I hang with, but we don't like the others. The others are wrong. Yeah? Excuse me, what? Oh, some are being colloquially English. The others are wrong in some way. So it's in-group, out-group thinking. And you do get this with adults. You get this sometimes in groups at work. Ooh, marketing, really hate IT. Yes. so they might regress to that. When they're all hanging out together, they can regress to this level of in-group, out-group. And this is quite an interesting one in type ways, because if you're working with someone at this level about type, they might not know themselves. You might hear a lot of shoulds, must, oughts to. I was coaching a guy who was very much at this level, and he was saying how he'd gone for a job that he didn't even want, but I should do it, shouldn't I? It's what people expect, it's what you do when you're in this job. So you hear all that. Okay, then the expert. What does the expert sound like? Me! Yeah. So I call that personal identity. And this is where you start to get a bit of self-awareness about yourself. So what am I like? What do I like doing? Let me go and find my niche. So a lot of people in technical roles, science roles, engineering, stuff like that, might be at this level. They might stop there, because that's all they need. So yeah, I know myself, I found my niche. I know other people are different. Aren't they weird? Yeah? Why are they not like me? The next one, achiever. Does that sound like anything? TJ types, perhaps? I called it determined action because it's where you start to get that awareness and actually channel it into trying to make things happen. Okay. So this is the level you need to be at to be pretty okay as a manager. Because you'll have some degree of self-awareness. You'll know the others are different, but you won't think they're weird anymore. Well, you might think they're weird, but you actually accept that they're quite useful and some of their differences are valid. So you're looking for answers, tend to be thinking that there is always a way or a truth in something. Okay, there's a bit of a jump to the next level, where there's quite a big shift in perspective. She called it the individualist, but I called it considerate individualism because it's actually quite nice. So this is an interesting stage where you no longer feel like you have one view or one opinion. You can see multiple perspectives on things. So you might think, oh yeah, I'll go in there, I've got my opinion. What do you think? Let me find out what other people are thinking. Do you know, you've got a good point there, you've just shifted my opinion. What about you? What do you think? Oh, you've got a good point too. You've just shifted my opinion. Now what do I think? So it's an actually dealing with complexity and broad, but it actually can feel very inner conflicty because you feel like you don't know what you think anymore. Things are complex, and you realise that things are connected and complicated. But this is the level you need to be at to be a good leader. And you need to be able to hold that complexity. You need to be able to admit when you're wrong, admit when you don't know. So the humility starts to kick in at these later levels. Right, this is where my knowledge bottoms out because I'm somewhere on the desert, right? I can only tell you these bits from the books. This bit I can sort of get my head around a bit, but from here it's like bewildering. Yeah?
Is there a type associated with the individual?
No. No.
So this starts to get out.
I'll come back to that one. So, strategist integration, all I can tell you about this is they resolve that conflict. They are much more able to synthesize those different opinions and those different views. So they're operating in a less conflicted way. And then the last one was called magician. And I thought that was nice, so I kept it. Because I like things like that. And this is where things are completely integrated. This is the person that's seeing, you know, the universe. They see systems and time frames. I didn't mention time, did I?
No.
Time frames get bigger and bigger as you go through. So the people at the much later stages of development really can see how the future and the past connect together and all this stuff. So, this is just a bit of data for those of you who like it. This is a study that Suzanne Cook-Reuter did. She thinks it might be slightly skewed, and I'll tell you why. But generally, most people stop developing here. Yeah? So this is your expertise science coffin, this is your manager. Because to make the development go further than that, you actually actively have to give yourself experiences. You have to reflect on it, you have to push that comfort zone, you have to break out of the box. The only reason she says it might be skewed, and it should possibly be that more people are down here, is because she asked for volunteers for the study. And people who volunteer for research tend to know why they're doing it. So it's slightly skewed. Let me just go through a couple of quick points, and then I'll shut up for a minute, because I'm getting fed up my voice. So, individuals often experience a bit of fluctuation when they're going through a shift. So there's really turmoily parts of your life where everything feels like it's going to hell and you don't know what you're doing. They can be a sign that there's a shift coming along. Something's broken your perspective, something's challenged you. Some adults get stuck at early stages of development if their experiences in life or if their upbringing is not so great.